Khalil Mansouri's cruel laughter echoed through the Munich restaurant as he mocked the black waitress in rapid German, unaware that Amara Okafor, the woman refilling his water glass, owned every brick of the building beneath his feet. This story is a tribute to every person who has ever stood up to bullies, every community that has faced injustice together, and every dreamer who refused to let others define their worth. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions happen not in the streets, but around dinner tables where people decide they've had enough and choose to fight back, together. My beautiful family and friends, welcome back. If you're ready for another unforgettable story, do me a quick favor, hit that like button. Why? Because every like tells YouTube, this story is worth sharing with more people who might really need it today. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I do read every single one, and it makes me feel like we're sitting together in the same room, sharing these moments heart to heart. And don't forget to share this video with someone you love. You never know, the story you share might be the encouragement they've been praying for. This isn't just a channel, it's a family. And when you engage, you're helping us build a safe space where real stories bring real hope. Now, take a deep breath. Get comfortable, and let's dive into today's story. The crystal chandeliers of Goldener Hirsch cast dancing shadows across mahogany walls, their warm glow a stark contrast to the ice-cold tension brewing at table 7. Steam rose from perfectly plated Wiener Schnitzel, while the soft murmur of German conversations created an elegant backdrop to Munich's most exclusive dining establishment. The scent of sautéed mushrooms and aged wine hung thick in the air, but Amara Okafor barely noticed these familiar comforts as she approached the corner booth where two men sat in expensive suits, their voices low and conspiratorial. Khalil Mansouri adjusted his platinum cufflinks, his dark eyes scanning the restaurant with the predatory confidence of a man accustomed to owning everything he surveyed. Across from him, his business associate Tariq Qadri leaned back in the plush leather booth, a thin smile playing at his lips as he swirled his glass of Dom Perignon. "The acquisition should be seamless," Khalil said in Arabic, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no. These small restaurant owners always crack under financial pressure. A few strategic moves, and this little German establishment will be begging to sell. Amara's hand tightened imperceptibly around the crystal water pitcher as she approached their table. 28 years old with rich brown skin that seemed to glow under the restaurant's warm lighting, she moved with a grace that spoke of both strength and careful restraint. Her server's uniform, pressed black slacks and a crisp white button-down, was immaculate, but those who looked closely might notice the way she carried herself, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, like someone used to command rather than service. "More water, gentlemen?" she asked in perfect German, her voice melodious despite the tension threading through her words. Khalil barely glanced up from his plate, dismissing her with a wave of his manicured hand. "Just keep it filled and stay quiet," he replied in German, his accent thick with condescension. "We have important business to discuss." What happened next would replay in Amara's mind for days to come. As she leaned forward to refill their glasses, Tariq's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at the screen, then looked up at Amara with a cruel smile that made her blood run cold. "You know what's funny, Khalil?" Tariq said, switching to German while his eyes never left Amara's face. "I was just reading about this place online. Apparently, some African woman thinks she can run a European restaurant. Can you imagine? These people serving our food, pretending they understand sophistication." Khalil's laughter was like broken glass. "Please, Tariq. Look at her," he gestured toward Amara with his fork, speaking as if she weren't standing right there. "She probably thinks schnitzel is some kind of chicken dish. These workers, they're all the same." Take orders, clear tables, go home to whatever cramped apartment they can afford on minimum wage. The water pitcher trembled slightly in Amara's grip, but her voice remained steady. Will there be anything else, sir? Actually, yes, Khalil said, his tone dripping with mockery as he continued in German. Could you ask your manager if they're hiring? My friend here thinks it might be amusing to own a little German restaurant. You know, for the novelty. We could probably buy this whole place for what I spend on a weekend yacht rental. Tarek chuckled, raising his champagne glass. To easy acquisitions and cheap labor. As they clinked glasses, neither man noticed the way Amara's jaw tightened, or how her free hand briefly touched the simple gold pendant at her throat, a pendant that bore the same coat of arms subtly engraved on the restaurant's front door. They didn't see the flash of something dangerous in her dark eyes, or the way her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. I'll be sure to pass along your interest to the owner, Amara said softly, setting the pitcher down with deliberate care. I have a feeling she'll be very interested in meeting with you both. As she turned to walk away, Khalil called out in German, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, and tell her to teach her staff some proper manners. This one acts like she owns the place. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for just a moment, Amara paused. When she looked back over her shoulder, her smile had widened, and there was something in her expression that should have warned them both. Instead, Khalil and Tarek returned to their conversation, completely unaware that they had just insulted the wrong woman on the wrong night. What would you do if someone mocked you in a language they thought you couldn't understand, not knowing you held all the power? Share your thoughts below. The kitchen of Goldener Hirsch buzzed with controlled chaos, but Amara moved through it like a dancer navigating a familiar stage. She set the empty water pitcher on the stainless steel counter with more force than necessary, drawing concerned glances from the staff who had learned to read her moods over the past 3 years. Moschen, what's wrong? The voice belonged to Gretchen Weber, the restaurant's head chef, a 60-year-old woman whose silver hair was always pulled back in a tight bun and whose weathered hands could create culinary magic. She had been the first person to see past Amara's carefully constructed facade, and the only one who dared to call her by the pet name that meant Little Mouse. Amara forced a smile, but Gretchen's sharp blue eyes missed nothing. Just difficult customers, Oma. Nothing I can't handle. Difficult customers don't usually make you grip water pitchers like you want to strangle them. Gretchen wiped her hands on her apron, studying Amara's face with the intensity of someone who had raised 5 children and could spot trouble from a mile away. Those 2 men in the corner booth. Before Amara could respond, the kitchen door swung open, and Dmitry Volkov entered with his characteristic silent grace. At 35, the restaurant sommelier and security consultant moved like a man who had once been very dangerous and might still be, if the situation called for it. His pale green eyes surveyed the kitchen before settling on Amara, and something in his expression suggested he had already assessed the threat level of their evening guests. The men at table 7, he said without preamble, his slight Russian accent lending weight to each word. I ran their faces through recognition software. Khalil Mansouri, CEO of Mansouri Holdings, oil, real estate, hostile takeovers. Net worth approximately $2.3 billion. His companion is Tarek Kadri, merger and acquisition specialist, known for aggressive business tactics. Amara's eyebrows rose slightly. You ran facial recognition in the middle of dinner service? I run facial recognition on anyone who looks at you the wrong way, Dmitry replied matter-of-factly. It's what you pay me for. Gretchen looked between them, her maternal instincts prickling. What exactly did they say to you, Moschen? Amara glanced around the kitchen, ensuring they couldn't be overheard by the other staff members who bustled about their duties, unaware of the undercurrent of tension. Jacob, the young sous chef, was focused intently on his sauce reduction. Maria, one of the servers, laughed at something Klaus, the bartender, had whispered to her as they prepared drink orders. These people weren't just employees, they were family. Each one had been carefully chosen, not just for their skills, but for their stories. Jacob was working to support his sick mother. Maria was putting herself through university. Klaus was a recovering alcoholic who had found purpose in creating craft cocktails. Gretchen had been on the verge of retirement when Amara offered her the chance to run her dream kitchen. They think this restaurant is run by some African woman who doesn't understand European sophistication, Amara said, her voice carefully controlled. They're planning to acquire this place, and they seem to think the current owner will be easy to manipulate. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop several degrees. Gretchen's jaw tightened, and Dimitri's expression became positively arctic. "Skice," Gretchen muttered under her breath. "They have no idea who you are." "And we're going to keep it that way," Amara said firmly, "for now." What none of her evening customers knew, what very few people in Munich knew, was that Amara Okafor had inherited more than just money when her grandmother passed away 5 years ago. She had inherited a legacy, a responsibility, and a burning desire to prove that grace under pressure was more powerful than any hostile takeover. Her grandmother, Adora Okafor, had been a force of nature, a Nigerian diplomat who had married a German businessman in the 1960s and spent decades navigating the complex worlds of international relations and European society. When she died, she left Amara not just a substantial fortune, but also 3 carefully chosen businesses: this restaurant, a boutique hotel in Berlin, and a small but influential consulting firm that specialized in cultural integration. "Your wealth is not your power," Adora had written in her final letter to Amara. "Your power lies in how you choose to use your gifts to lift others. But remember, my dear granddaughter, sometimes the most profound lessons come from allowing people to reveal who they truly are." Standing in the kitchen now, watching Gretchen's protective fury and Dimitri's calculating anger, Amara felt the weight of those words. She had spent 3 years working in her own restaurant, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. She knew the suppliers' names, could prep vegetables faster than most of the kitchen staff, and had personally interviewed every employee. This wasn't just about business. It was about proving to herself that she could honor her grandmother's legacy while staying true to her own values. "What's the plan?" Dimitri asked, and there was something in his tone that suggested he was already formulating several options, not all of them legal. "The plan," Amara said, removing her server's apron and hanging it carefully on its hook, "is to show them exactly what happens when you underestimate someone based on the color of their skin and the uniform they're wearing." She moved toward the kitchen's back office, a small but elegantly appointed room that served as the restaurant's administrative hub. Dimitri and Gretchen followed, understanding without being told that whatever happened next would require privacy. The office walls were lined with framed photographs, her grandmother shaking hands with various European dignitaries, the restaurant's opening night 5 years ago, candid shots of the staff during their annual holiday party. On the mahogany desk sat a simple brass nameplate that read A. Okafor Proprietor, deliberately ambiguous, as she had always preferred. Amara opened her laptop and pulled up the restaurant's reservation system, scrolling through the evening's bookings until she found what she was looking for. "Table 7, she said, pointing to the screen. "Reserved under Mansouri Holdings. They specifically requested our finest table and most expensive wine pairing." She looked up at Gretchen and Dimitri, and for the first time that evening, her smile was genuine. They want to impress someone, which means they need something from this meeting. You think they're not here just to eat, Gretchen said. It wasn't a question. I think, Amara replied, they're here to scout their next acquisition target. And I think it's time we gave them a show they'll never forget. As if summoned by her words, there was a soft knock on the office door. Maria peeked her head in, her expression concerned. Entschuldigung, Amara, but the men at table 7 are asking for the manager. They say they want to discuss a business proposition with the owner. Amara, Gretchen, and Dmitri exchanged glances. Perfect timing, Amara murmured. Tell them the manager will be right out. And Maria? Make sure their wine glasses never empty. I have a feeling they're going to need the liquid courage. As Maria hurried back to the dining room, Amara opened her desk drawer and withdrew a small velvet jewelry box. Inside lay a pair of elegant diamond earrings, a gift from her grandmother for her university graduation. She had never worn them while working as a server, but tonight felt like an occasion that called for every advantage. What exactly are you planning? Dmitri asked, though his tone suggested he was already looking forward to whatever came next. I'm planning to give them exactly what they asked for, Amara replied, fastening the earrings and checking her reflection in the small mirror mounted inside her desk drawer. A meeting with the owner of Goldener Hirsch. They just might not be expecting the owner to look like me. She stood, smoothing her server's uniform one last time before removing it entirely and reaching for a blazer that had been hanging behind her office door. The transformation was subtle but striking, the same woman, but now clearly in command rather than in service. Gretchen, I need you to call Werner, she said, referring to their business attorney. Have him pull together everything we have on Mansouri Holdings. Financial records, business practices, any legal issues. Everything. Dmitri, I need you to document everything that happens tonight. Audio, video if possible, but discreetly. I have a feeling we're going to need evidence of this conversation. Both of them nodded, understanding that whatever game was about to begin, the stakes were higher than a simple case of rude customers. As Amara reached for the office door handle, Gretchen caught her wrist gently. Moschen, be careful. Men like that, they don't like to be made fools of. Amara covered Gretchen's hand with her own, feeling the calluses from decades of kitchen work, the strength that had built this restaurant's reputation one dish at a time. Oma, she said softly, I learned from the best. My grandmother didn't survive 40 years of international diplomacy by being careful. She survived by being smarter, more prepared, and more gracious than anyone expected. They want to meet the owner of this restaurant. Her smile was sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. Then let's give them exactly what they asked for. The dining room of Goldener Hirsch seemed to hold its breath as Amara emerged from the kitchen, her transformation complete. Gone was the deferential server who had endured their mockery just 20 minutes earlier. In her place stood a woman who commanded attention without saying a word, her posture straight, her gaze direct, her simple black blazer tailored to perfection over a silk blouse that caught the light from the chandeliers. She moved through the restaurant with purposeful grace, nodding politely to other guests who looked up from their meals with curious interest. At the corner booth, Khalil and Tariq were deep in conversation, their voices animated as they discussed what Amara could now clearly hear were acquisition strategies and profit margins. Gentlemen, she said in flawless German, her voice carrying easily over their conversation. I understand you wish to speak with the owner of this establishment. Both men looked up, and the expression that crossed their faces was almost comical in its confusion. Khalil's fork paused halfway to his mouth, a piece of schnitzel forgotten as his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Tariq's champagne glass froze in mid-air, his mouth slightly open. "I'm sorry," Khalil said slowly, his eyes darting around the dining room as if searching for the real manager. "There must be some mistake. We asked to speak with the owner, not—" He gestured vaguely at Amara, clearly struggling to find words that wouldn't sound obviously racist. "Not the waitress," Amara supplied helpfully, sliding into the booth across from them with fluid confidence. "You're absolutely right. There has been a mistake, though perhaps not the one you think." She placed a business card on the table between them with deliberate precision. The card was cream-colored, elegant in its simplicity. Amara Okafor, proprietor, Goldener Hirsch Restaurant Group. The silence that followed was so profound that Amara could hear the soft classical music playing from the restaurant's sound system, the gentle clink of silverware from nearby tables, the whispered conversation of a couple celebrating their anniversary 3 tables away. Tariq was the first to recover, though his voice came out strangled. This is impossible. You were just serving us water." "I was," Amara agreed pleasantly. "I find it important to stay connected to every aspect of my business. You'd be surprised how much you can learn about people when they think you're invisible." Khalil's face had gone through several color changes, from pale shock to red embarrassment to something approaching purple fury. His hands clenched on the table, his knuckles white against his olive skin. "This is some kind of joke," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Some elaborate setup. You're telling me that He stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air like poison. "A what?" Amara asked, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp as winter steel. "Please, finish your sentence. A what exactly?" The tension at the table was thick enough to cut, and Amara noticed that conversations at nearby tables had grown quieter. Her peripheral vision caught Dimitri positioned near the bar, his hand resting casually near his jacket pocket where she knew he kept various useful tools. Gretchen hovered near the kitchen doors, her face a mask of protective fury. "A black woman," Khalil finally spat, abandoning any pretense of politeness. "You're telling me that a black woman owns one of Munich's premier restaurants? That you somehow managed to acquire prime real estate in the heart of the city? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe." "And yet," Amara said, pulling out her phone and showing them the screen where her banking app displayed an account balance that made their champagne look like pocket change, "here we are." Tariq leaned forward, his business instincts overriding his social discomfort. "Even if this is legitimate, you're clearly in over your head. Running a restaurant isn't just about having money. It requires connections, understanding of the market, cultural knowledge that you simply don't possess." "Cultural knowledge," Amara repeated thoughtfully. "You mean like knowing that the schnitzel you're eating was prepared using a recipe perfected by my head chef, who trained under Klaus Muller at Restaurant Tantris? Or perhaps you're referring to my inability to understand the local wine market, which would explain why our sommelier just served you a 2015 Riesling from Weingut Wittmann that pairs perfectly with your arrogance." Khalil slammed his hand on the table, causing their plates to jump and drawing startled looks from other diners. "Enough of this charade. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. We're serious businessmen with a serious offer." "Then let's hear it," Amara said, settling back in her seat with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "We're prepared to offer you 2.5 million euros for this property," Tariq said, his voice gaining strength as he moved into familiar territory. "Cash, no contingencies, quick closing. You could take the money and do whatever it is your people do with sudden wealth." The words hit Amara like a physical blow, not because of the money, which was less than half what the property was actually worth, but because of the casual racism wrapped around the supposed generosity of their offer. "My people," she said quietly, and something in her tone made both men shift uncomfortably. "And what exactly do my people do with sudden wealth, Mr. Qadri?" "Look," Khalil interjected, clearly sensing they were losing control of the conversation. "This isn't personal. It's business. You're out of your depth here. Take our offer, walk away with enough money to live comfortably, and let professionals handle what you clearly can't manage on your own." Amara was quiet for a long moment, studying both men with the intensity of a scientist examining particularly unpleasant specimens. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of ancestors who had faced down colonizers, diplomats who had negotiated with world leaders, and her grandmother's iron will. "Gentlemen, I'm going to make you both an offer," she said, and there was something in her tone that made Dmitri straighten at his post and Gretchen step closer to their table. "I'm going to give you exactly 1 week to research who I am, what I own, and what I'm capable of. Then you're going to come back here, not as customers, but as the desperate businessmen you're about to become, and you're going to apologize. Not just to me, but to every member of my staff that you insulted with your presence tonight." She stood, her movement fluid and final. "And if you don't, I'm going to show you exactly what happens when someone mistakes my kindness for weakness. My grandmother didn't teach me diplomacy, so I could be walked over by small men with smaller minds." Khalil shot to his feet, his face twisted with rage. "You have no idea who you're threatening, little girl. I could crush this pathetic little restaurant with a phone call. I could make sure you never get another business loan, another permit, another—" "Mr. Mansouri," Amara interrupted, and her voice cut through his bluster like a sword through silk. "You just threatened me in front of 30 witnesses, in my own establishment, while being recorded by my security system. I'd suggest you choose your next words very carefully." The color drained from both men's faces as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. "1 week," Amara repeated, placing a €100 note on the table. "Your meal tonight is on the house. Consider it an investment in your education." She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back over her shoulder with the same smile that had once warned them they were treading on dangerous ground. "Oh, and gentlemen, next time you want to mock someone in a foreign language, you might want to make sure they don't speak it better than you do. My grandmother was the German ambassador to Nigeria for 15 years. I learned German before I learned English." As she walked away, leaving two of the most powerful men in the Middle East sitting in stunned silence, Amara felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through business school, through the grief of losing her grandmother, through every challenge she had faced in building her empire. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. But they were about to find out. What do you think Amara should do next to teach these men a lesson they'll never forget? Drop your ideas in the comments below. The silence in Goldener Hirsch was deafening after Amara's departure. Khalil and Tariq sat frozen in their booth, the weight of their humiliation settling around them like a toxic cloud. Other diners had returned to their conversations, but there was an undercurrent of electricity in the air, the kind that follows a lightning strike and promises more storms to come. "This isn't over," Khalil finally whispered, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, scrolling through contacts with the desperate fury of a man whose entire worldview had just been shattered. Tariq leaned across the table, his voice urgent and low. "Khalil, we need to be smart about this. She recorded everything. If we move too quickly—" "Smart." Khalil's laugh was bitter and sharp. Smart would have been walking away the moment that little. He caught himself, glancing around at the other diners who were still stealing curious looks in their direction. The moment she revealed herself. But we're here now, and I'm not going to be humiliated by some upstart who thinks owning one restaurant makes her untouchable. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Amara was discovering that victory came with its own complications. The staff had gathered around her like a protective circle, their faces showing a mixture of pride, concern, and barely contained excitement. "Mein Gott," Jacob breathed, his usual shy demeanor replaced by something approaching awe. "You should have seen their faces when you told them about the German ambassador. I thought the tall one was going to faint." "This is bad," Maria said, wringing her hands. "Men like that, they don't just accept defeat. They'll come back harder." Dmitri emerged from the shadows near the bar, his phone in his hand and his expression grim. "They're already making calls. I intercepted part of a conversation, something about building permits and health inspections." Gretchen slammed her cleaver down on the cutting board with enough force to make everyone jump. "Skies. I knew this would happen. Powerful men don't like being shown up by anyone, especially not by a young black woman who's smarter than they are." Amara felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, the same feeling she'd carried since inheriting her grandmother's legacy. These people weren't just her employees, they were her family, and she had just painted a target on all of their backs. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had been bred into her bones. "What happened tonight was inevitable. Men like Khalil Mansouri don't just stumble into restaurants for casual meals. They were scouting us, planning to buy us out anyway. At least now we know what we're up against." She moved to the small office computer and began typing rapidly, her fingers flying over the keys with practiced efficiency. "Dmitri, I need you to run a full security sweep. Cameras, recording devices, cybersecurity, everything. If they're going to play dirty, we need to be prepared." "Already on it," he replied, but there was something in his expression that made Amara pause. "What aren't you telling me?" Dmitri hesitated, which was unlike him. In the 3 years he had worked for her, she had never seen him uncertain about anything. "I did some deeper research while you were handling things. Khalil Mansouri's reputation for hostile takeovers isn't just about business. There have been allegations, never proven, about intimidation tactics, sudden health code violations at competitor establishments, staff members receiving job offers they couldn't refuse." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft bubbling of sauces on the stove and the distant murmur of diners in the main restaurant. "You're saying he's dangerous," Amara said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm saying he's desperate," Dmitri corrected. "And desperate men do unpredictable things." As if summoned by their conversation, Amara's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Enjoy your little victory tonight. It will be your last. A friend." She showed the message to the others, watching their faces harden with determination rather than fear. This was why she had chosen each of them carefully. They were all fighters in their own ways. "Right," she said, deleting the message and sliding her phone back into her pocket. "If they want a war, they'll get one. But we're going to fight smart." Over the next hour, as the last customers filtered out of the restaurant and the staff began their closing routines, Amara outlined her strategy. It was complex, multi-layered, and would require each member of her team to play their part perfectly. "Gretchen, I need you to document everything, every supplier relationship, every permit, every health inspection report for the past 5 years. If they're going to attack our operations, I want to be able to prove we're beyond reproach." Jacob, you're going to help me with social media. We're going to tell our story before they can tell theirs. The narrative of tonight, of what really happened, needs to come from us. Maria, I need you to connect with our regular customers, especially the local business owners and community leaders. Word of mouth is going to be crucial. And Klaus, she turned to the bartender, who had been quietly cleaning glasses while listening to every word. I need you to keep your ears open. Bartenders hear everything, and right now, information is going to be our most valuable currency. As the team dispersed to begin their tasks, Dmitri lingered behind. There's something else, he said quietly. Something I found while researching Mansouri Holdings. Amara looked up from the reservation book she was updating, noting the subtle tension in his posture. They're not just interested in acquiring restaurants, he continued. They've been systematically buying up properties in this district, the bakery 3 blocks down, the boutique hotel on Marienplatz, even some residential buildings. This entire area is being gentrified, and they're the ones driving it. The implications hit Amara like a physical blow. This wasn't just about her restaurant. It was about her entire neighborhood, the community that had welcomed her grandmother decades ago and had embraced her in return. They're trying to erase this place, she whispered, understanding flooding through her. They want to turn this historic district into some sanitized corporate version of German culture. It gets worse, Dmitri said, pulling up something on his phone. I found records of other business owners who refused to sell. Strange how many of them suddenly faced unexpected problems. Failed health inspections, tax audits, suppliers mysteriously unable to fulfill contracts. Amara felt a chill that had nothing to do with Munich's cool evening air. How many businesses have they acquired in the past 2 years? 14. And every single one of the original owners was either elderly, an immigrant, or both. The pattern was clear, and it made Amara's stomach turn. This wasn't just about money or business expansion. This was about cultural erasure, about systematically removing the very people who gave this neighborhood its character and soul. Show me the list, she said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. As Dmitri pulled up the information, Amara's phone rang. The caller ID showed Werner Hoffman, her attorney and one of her grandmother's oldest friends. Werner, she answered, noting the late hour. This is unexpected. Liebling, came the familiar voice, warm but edged with concern. I just received a very interesting phone call. It seems someone has been asking questions about your business licenses, your immigration status, and your financial backing. Very specific questions. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the pieces of Khalil's strategy falling into place. How long do we have? If they're thorough? Perhaps 72 hours before they realize that every document you have is ironclad, every permit is current, and your legal status is unassailable. But Amara. Werner's voice grew serious. They also asked about your grandmother's estate. That's not random curiosity. That's someone looking for vulnerabilities. After ending the call, Amara found herself alone in the quiet restaurant, surrounded by the familiar comfort of mahogany walls and soft lighting. This place was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a bridge between her grandmother's world and her own, a testament to the possibility of belonging somewhere while staying true to who you were. She thought about her grandmother's words, "Your power lies in how you choose to use your gifts to lift others." Tonight, she had protected herself. But tomorrow, she would have to protect everyone. Her phone buzzed again with another unknown number. 2.5 million was generous. Tomorrow it drops to 2. Every day you delay costs you 100K. Think about your staff. Do you really want to drag them down with you? Amara stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled, the same dangerous smile that had warned Khalil and Tariq earlier that evening. She typed back, "Counteroffer, apologize publicly, donate 1 million to local immigrant business development, and stay out of Munich. Or find out what happens when you underestimate a woman who learned strategy from diplomats and business from the best. Your choice. You have 72 hours." After hitting send, she added, "P.S. Next time you want to threaten someone, maybe don't do it from a phone registered to your company. My security consultant finds that terribly unprofessional." As she locked up the restaurant and headed home through Munich's quiet streets, Amara felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through every challenge in her life. Khalil Mansouri thought he was fighting a restaurant owner. He had no idea he was about to go to war with a diplomatic legacy, a brilliant business mind, and a woman who had inherited her grandmother's iron will wrapped in silk gloves. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at Goldener Hirsch, and the pressure campaign was escalating beyond anything Amara had anticipated. She stood in the restaurant's office at 6 a.m., staring at a stack of official-looking documents that had been delivered by courier just an hour earlier. Health inspection. Fire safety review. Business license audit. Tax investigation, she read aloud to Dimitri, who was reviewing security footage on his laptop. All scheduled for this week. All from departments that gave us clean reports just 3 months ago. "It gets worse," Dimitri said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've been tracking the digital footprint of these anonymous complaints against us. Want to guess where they originated?" Amara rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. Mansouri Holdings? Close. They're coming from IP addresses registered to law firms that Mansouri Holdings has used in the past. But that's not the interesting part. Dimitri turned his laptop screen toward her. "Look at this." The screen showed a complex web of business connections, property transfers, and acquisition records that made Amara's head spin. "What am I looking at?" "I spent the last 3 days mapping every business Khalil has acquired in Munich over the past 5 years. Restaurants, boutiques, small hotels, even some residential properties. But there's a pattern. Look at the dates." Amara leaned closer, studying the timeline. "They're all concentrated in this neighborhood. And they all happened after," she stopped, her blood running cold. "After my grandmother died." "Exactly. But here's what's really interesting." Dimitri clicked to another screen. Every single one of these businesses had one thing in common before Khalil acquired them. Which was? They were all part of a cultural preservation initiative that your grandmother championed during her time as a diplomatic liaison. She helped secure special zoning protections for this historic district, helped immigrant business owners get low-interest loans, even personally mentored several of the owners. The pieces clicked into place in Amara's mind like tumblers in a lock. He's been systematically dismantling her legacy. "It's worse than that," Dimitri said grimly. "I found records of the city council meetings where these zoning protections were discussed. Guess who was lobbying against them 5 years ago?" Before Amara could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. "Goldener Hirsch, this is Amara." "Ms. Okafor." The voice was crisp, professional, speaking English with a slight accent. "My name is Dr. Sarah Hassan. I'm calling from the Munich Business Ethics Council. I believe we need to meet immediately." Amara exchanged glances with Dimitri, who was already running the number through his identification software. "I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with." "Your restaurant is about to become the center of a very public scandal," Dr. Hassan interrupted. "Allegations of health code violations, tax evasion, and immigration fraud are being prepared for release to the media. You have approximately 4 hours before this story breaks." "That's impossible," Amara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We've done nothing wrong." "I know," Dr. Hassan replied. "That's why I'm calling. Can you meet me at the Bayer Rischer Hof Hotel in 30 minutes? Lobby bar. I'll be wearing a red scarf." After hanging up, Amara looked at Dmitri, who was frowning at his computer screen. "The Business Ethics Council is legitimate," he said. "Dr. Sarah Hassan is their chief investigator. She specializes in cases involving corporate intimidation and predatory business practices. Why would she want to help us? Maybe because she's been building a case against Khalil for longer than we realize." 30 minutes later, Amara sat across from Dr. Hassan in the elegant lobby bar of Munich's most prestigious hotel. The woman was younger than her voice had suggested, perhaps 40, with short dark hair and intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. She wore a tailored business suit and the promised red scarf. "Ms. Okafor," she began without preamble, "how much do you know about your grandmother's work beyond her official diplomatic duties?" Amara hesitated. "I know she was passionate about cultural preservation and immigrant rights." Dr. Hassan smiled grimly. "She was also one of our most valuable sources of information about corruption in Munich's business community. For 15 years, she provided documentation about illegal practices, bribes, and intimidation tactics used against minority business owners." The revelation hit Amara like a physical blow. She was working with law enforcement? Not officially. But she understood that her position gave her access to information that others couldn't obtain. "She helped us build cases against several corrupt officials and predatory businessmen." Dr. Hassan leaned forward. "Including Omar Mansouri, Khalil's father." Amara's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as her hands began to shake. What happened to the case? It was dropped after a series of convenient coincidences. Key witnesses relocated suddenly. Evidence disappeared. Your grandmother received several anonymous threats. Dr. Hassan's expression hardened. She backed away from active cooperation with our office, but she never stopped fighting. She just changed tactics. Changed tactics how? She started building a network. Every immigrant business owner she helped, every cultural organization she supported, every young entrepreneur she mentored, she was creating a community that could support and protect each other. She was building something that couldn't be bought or intimidated. The words hung in the air between them, and Amara felt the weight of understanding settling on her shoulders. "That's why Khalil is targeting this neighborhood specifically," she whispered. "He's not just gentrifying, he's destroying her network." "Exactly. And you, Ms. Okafor, are the keystone of that network. If he can destroy you, discredit you publicly, force you to sell, drive you out of Munich, then everything your grandmother built crumbles with you." Dr. Hassan reached into her briefcase and withdrew a tablet, showing Amara a series of documents. "These are the fabricated reports that will be released to the media this afternoon. Health violations that never happened. Tax discrepancies that don't exist. Immigration issues for several of your staff members, all conveniently timed to create maximum damage." Amara stared at the documents, feeling sick. "How do I stop this?" "You can't. Not directly. But there's something else you need to know. Dr. Hassan swiped to a new screen. We've been investigating Khalil Mansouri for 2 years now. We have evidence of bribery, tax evasion, and immigration fraud, real evidence, not fabricated nonsense like what he's preparing against you. Then why haven't you arrested him? Because we needed someone with standing to file a formal complaint. Someone who has been directly harmed by his actions and can testify to his methods. Dr. Hassan looked directly into Amara's eyes. Someone like you. The implications crashed over Amara like a wave. You want me to be bait. I want you to be the plaintiff in a case that will finally bring justice for your grandmother and every other person Khalil Mansouri has destroyed. Dr. Hassan closed her tablet. But it has to be your choice. If you agree to cooperate with our investigation, we can protect you from the false accusations he's planning to release. But it also means you become a target in ways you can't imagine. Amara thought about Gretchen's protective fury, Jacob's quiet loyalty, Maria's determination to finish university, Klaus's hard-won sobriety. She thought about all the businesses in her neighborhood that had already fallen to Khalil's predatory tactics, and all the families whose dreams had been crushed by his father's corruption decades ago. What do you need me to do? Dr. Hassan smiled for the first time since they'd met. We need you to do exactly what you've been doing. Stand up to him. Fight back. Let him escalate his tactics while we document everything. And when the time comes, we need you to testify about what he's done to you and your community. How long? 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Long enough for him to make the kind of mistakes that will put him away for a very long time. As Amara walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a text from Khalil. Last chance. Accept our offer by noon, or face the consequences. Your choice. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I've made my choice. Bring your worst. After sending the message, she called Dimitri. Gather everyone, she said. Staff meeting in 20 minutes. It's time they knew exactly what we're up against, and exactly what we're going to do about it. As she drove through Munich's morning traffic, Amara felt something shift inside her. The scared restaurant owner who had been reacting to Khalil's moves was gone. In her place was someone who understood that this fight had never been about money or property. It had always been about power, justice, and the right to exist without apology. Khalil Mansouri thought he was hunting prey. He was about to discover he had awakened a predator. The attack came swiftly and from multiple directions, like a coordinated military strike designed to destroy everything Amara held dear without leaving her any time to react or defend herself. It started at 6 a.m. when Jacob called, his voice shaking with panic. Amara, they came to my apartment. Men in suits, claiming to be from immigration services. They wanted to see all my documents, questioned my neighbors about whether I really live there. But I'm a German citizen. I was born here. Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed with another call. This time it was Maria, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. They called my university. Told them I was involved in some kind of financial fraud scheme. My scholarship has been suspended pending investigation. 24 credits from graduating, and now they're treating me like a criminal. Amara's blood ran cold. Maria, slow down. Who called your university? Anonymous tip, they said. But they had detailed information about my work schedule here, my salary, everything. How could strangers know all that? The phone calls continued throughout the morning. Klaus, devastated that his parole officer had received a complaint about his association with criminal elements and was threatening to revoke his work permit. Gretchen, whose supplier of 30 years had suddenly informed her that they could no longer fulfill their contracts due to concerns about payment reliability. By noon, Dimitri arrived at the restaurant with news that made Amara's worst fears seem optimistic. "They've filed complaints with every regulatory agency in Munich," he said, spreading official documents across her desk. "Health Department, Fire Safety, Building Codes, Tax Authority, Labor Board. Each one requires immediate inspection and could result in closure pending review." "How is that possible? We just passed all our inspections 3 months ago." "Anonymous complaints," Dimitri replied grimly. "Dozens of them, all filed simultaneously this morning. Each one detailed enough to trigger mandatory investigations. Someone spent considerable time and money gathering information about every aspect of our operations." Amara stared at the pile of official notices, feeling the walls closing in around her. "How long do we have?" "The Health Department will be here this afternoon. Fire Safety tomorrow morning. Building Codes the day after that. And Amara." Dimitri's voice grew even more serious. "These aren't routine inspections. They're looking for reasons to shut us down." As if summoned by their conversation, Werner Hoffman appeared in the doorway, his face ashen and his usually perfect appearance disheveled. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "A big one. Khalil's lawyers have found a way to challenge your ownership of this building." "That's impossible," Amara said, standing up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "My grandmother left everything to me legally. You handled the paperwork yourself." "They're claiming that the original purchase 30 years ago involved questionable financing," Werner explained, his voice strained. "They've produced documents suggesting that your grandmother may have used money from uncertain sources to acquire the property." The accusation hit Amara like a physical blow. "You know that's not true. My grandmother was a diplomat. Every cent she earned was documented and legal." "I know that, and you know that, but they have paperwork that looks authentic. Bank records, transfer documents, correspondence that suggests." Werner struggled to find the words. "That suggests she may have accepted payments from foreign governments beyond her official salary." "Bribes," Amara said flatly. "They're accusing her of taking bribes. The paperwork is very sophisticated. If I didn't know your grandmother personally, if I hadn't handled her legitimate financial affairs for 20 years, I might be convinced myself." Amara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she had built her life on, her grandmother's integrity, her own legal right to be here, the foundation of her entire identity, was being systematically dismantled by lies that were so expertly crafted they felt like truth. The health inspector arrived at 2 p.m. with an attitude that made it clear this wasn't going to be a fair evaluation. He spent 4 hours examining every corner of the kitchen, testing temperatures, checking dates, measuring distances between equipment with the dedication of someone who had been told exactly what violations to find. "This refrigeration unit is 3 degrees warmer than regulation allows," he announced, making notes on his clipboard. "Immediate health hazard." Gretchen stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "That thermometer was calibrated last month. It's been maintaining perfect temperature for 3 years." The inspector ignored her, moving to the next fabricated violation. "Inadequate ventilation in the prep area. Fire hazard and health concern." The ventilation system was upgraded 2 years ago and passed inspection with flying colors, Dimitri said, showing him the documentation. "Things change," the inspector replied coldly, continuing his methodical destruction of their livelihood. By the time he left, they had received 17 citations, each one requiring immediate correction or face immediate closure. The estimated cost of addressing all the violations exceeded €50,000. As the staff gathered in the office after closing, the weight of defeat settled over them like a funeral shroud. Klaus sat with his head in his hands, visibly shaking. Jacob paced back and forth like a caged animal. Maria stared at her phone, where her university's email confirmed the suspension of her scholarship. Gretchen stood with her back to them all, looking out the window at the street where she had worked for 3 years. "They're going to win, aren't they?" Maria asked quietly. "We could fight the violations," Werner said, but his voice lacked conviction. "If we hire expert witnesses, get independent inspections, file appeals." "How long would that take?" Amara asked. "Months. Maybe a year. And it would cost more money than the restaurant makes in profit." "Money I don't have," Amara admitted. "I've put everything into this place and the other businesses. I can't fight a legal battle that long." Klaus looked up for the first time in hours, and his eyes were hollow. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "The stress, the accusations, people looking at me like I'm a criminal again. I walked past a bar today and stood there for 20 minutes, just staring at the door." The confession sent a chill through the room. Everyone knew Klaus's story, knew how hard he had fought to stay sober, knew that losing him to addiction would be a tragedy beyond the business consequences. "I won't be responsible for that," Amara said firmly. "I won't let my fight destroy you." "It's not just Klaus," Jacob said miserably. "The immigration investigators want to review my citizenship documents. Even though I was born here, they're questioning whether my parents' marriage was legitimate when I was born. They could make my life hell for years." "My scholarship advisor called this afternoon," Maria added. "Even if I'm cleared of any wrongdoing, the university doesn't want to be associated with this situation. They're suggesting I might be happier transferring somewhere else." Gretchen finally turned from the window, and there were tears on her cheeks. "40 years I've been cooking. 40 years building a reputation. Now suppliers won't return my calls. Other restaurants don't want to hire someone under investigation. I'm 60 years old. Who's going to take a chance on me now?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Klaus's shaking breath and Maria's quiet sobs. These people weren't just her employees. They were her family. And she was watching them being destroyed one by one because she had refused to bow down to a bully. Her phone buzzed with a text from Khalil. "Final offer, €200,000, and we make all of this go away. Your staff gets clean references, the investigations disappear, everyone moves on with their lives. You have 24 hours to decide if your pride is worth destroying the people who trust you." €200,000. For a property worth $5 million, for a business that had taken years to build, for a legacy that connected her to her grandmother's memory. But as she looked around the room at Klaus's trembling hands, at Maria's tear-stained face, at Gretchen's broken expression, at Jacob's desperate fear, Amara realized that some prices were too high to pay. "Maybe," she said quietly, and the word felt like poison in her mouth, "maybe we should consider it." The looks of relief mixed with disappointment on their faces told her everything she needed to know. They loved her, but they also needed this nightmare to end, even if it meant surrender. Outside, Munich continued its evening routines, unaware that in a small restaurant office, A woman was about to sacrifice everything she had ever worked for to save the people she loved from the consequences of her own stubborn courage. For the first time since this battle began, defeat felt not just possible, but inevitable. And the worst part was that accepting it felt like the only way to protect the people who mattered most. The restaurant fell into a silence so profound that Amara could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. She stared at Khalil's message, feeling the weight of surrender pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. 200,000 euros to walk away from everything her grandmother had built, everything she had fought to preserve. "I need some air," she said quietly, standing up on unsteady legs. "Give me a few minutes to think." She walked through the darkened dining room, her fingers trailing along the mahogany walls that had witnessed countless celebrations, quiet conversations, and shared meals. The tables where families had marked anniversaries, where business deals had been sealed with handshakes, where strangers had become friends over perfectly prepared schnitzel and aged wine. At table 7, the scene of that first confrontation with Khalil, she stopped and sat down in the same chair she had occupied just days ago when she had felt so confident, so certain that truth and justice would prevail over money and corruption. How naive she had been. Her phone buzzed with a new message, but this one wasn't from Khalil. It was from an unknown local number. "Turn on the radio. Bayern 3. Now." Curious despite her despair, Amara pulled up the radio station's live stream on her phone. The evening talk show was in progress, and the host was interviewing someone whose voice made her sit up straight. "My name is Heinrich Müller, and I owned Müller's Bakery on Rosenstrasse for 37 years before I was forced to sell it last year." Amara's breath caught. Müller's Bakery had been one of her grandmother's favorite places, a cornerstone of the neighborhood that had mysteriously closed after the owner faced a series of health violations and financial difficulties. "Tell us what happened, Heinrich," the radio host prompted. "It started with anonymous complaints. Suddenly, inspectors were finding problems that had never existed before. My suppliers began having scheduling conflicts. My insurance company found reasons to increase my premiums by 400%. Heinrich's voice was steady but filled with quiet anger. "I kept detailed records of everything, and I can prove that every violation was fabricated, every problem was manufactured." "That's a serious accusation," the host said. "It's a serious crime," Heinrich replied. "And it's happening to good people all over Munich. Small business owners, immigrants, anyone who won't bow down to certain powerful interests who want to remake this city in their own image." Amara's pulse quickened as she heard footsteps behind her. The entire staff had emerged from the office and were gathering around her, drawn by something in her expression. "What is it?" Gretchen asked. "Sure," Amara said, turning up the volume. Heinrich continued, "I have documentation of a pattern of harassment and intimidation going back 3 years. Businesses owned by immigrants, by women, by working-class families, all facing the same manufactured crises. All being offered buyouts by the same shell companies. All connected to the same source." "You're talking about Mansouri Holdings," the host said, and Amara could hear the gravity in his voice. "I'm talking about organized crime disguised as business development. And I'm not the only one who knows it." The phone started ringing as Heinrich spoke, and the host began taking callers. One after another, voices filled the airwaves, business owners who had been forced to sell, employees who had lost their jobs, community members who had watched their neighborhood being systematically dismantled. "This is Anna Schneider. I ran a boutique hotel near Marienplatz until last year. This is Roberto Sanchez. My family's restaurant was destroyed by false accusations. This is Chen Wei. They took my import business with lies and fabricated documents. With each voice, Amara felt something awakening in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something fiercer. Recognition. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. Klaus, who had been sitting in defeated silence for hours, suddenly stood up. "I know Heinrich Müller," he said, his voice stronger than it had been all day. "He sponsored my AA group when I was getting sober. He's the most honest man I've ever met." "And Anna Schneider," Gretchen added, her eyes brightening. "She used to order our catering for her hotel guests. She was driven out by the same tactics they're using on us." Jacob was staring at the phone with growing excitement. Roberto Sanchez. His son was in my class at university. The family restaurant was legendary. They had been there for 40 years before they were forced to close. "They're all fighting back," Maria said wonderingly. "They're all speaking out." The radio host's voice cut through their conversation. "If you've been affected by these practices, if you have documentation or evidence, we want to hear from you. We're putting together a special investigation, and we need your stories." Amara looked around at her staff, seeing the same realization dawning on all their faces. They weren't victims in an isolated attack. They were part of a community under siege, and that community was finally ready to fight back together. "Dimitri," she said, her voice steady for the first time in hours, "how many businesses in this neighborhood has Khalil acquired in the past 3 years?" 14 that I've documented," he replied, understanding immediately where she was going. "And how many of those owners do you think kept records? How many of them documented the harassment, the false accusations, the manufactured crises?" "All of them," Gretchen said with growing confidence. "People like Heinrich don't just roll over. They document everything, even when they're forced to surrender." Amara stood up, feeling energy returning to her body like electricity flowing through dead circuits. "Then we're not fighting this battle alone. We never were." She walked to the restaurant's landline phone behind the bar and dialed the number the radio host had given for people to share their stories. "Bayern 3, this is Marcus," came the voice after 2 rings. "My name is Amara Okafor. I own Goldener Hirsch restaurant, and I'm currently under attack by the same people your other callers have been describing. I have evidence. I have documentation. And I'm ready to fight." As she spoke, she watched her staff transform before her eyes. Klaus straightened his shoulders, the tremor leaving his hands. Jacob stopped pacing and started taking notes. Maria wiped away her tears and opened her laptop. Gretchen moved to the kitchen and began pulling files from her meticulously organized records. "Can you be at the station in an hour?" Marcus asked. "I'll be there," Amara replied. "And I won't be coming alone." After hanging up, she turned to face her team, her family, and saw the same determination reflected in every face. "You don't have to do this," she said. "If you want to walk away, if you want to take whatever settlement Khalil offers and start over somewhere else, I'll understand." "Moschen," Gretchen said, using the pet name she had called Amara since the first day they met, "where do you think you learned to fight? You think your grandmother faced down corruption and injustice all by herself? She had allies. She had community. She had people who believed that some things are worth fighting for." Klaus nodded, his voice steady and sure. "I spent 5 years drowning in alcohol because I thought I was fighting my demons alone. The day I realized I had people who would stand with me was the day I got sober. I'm not walking away from the people who saved my life." Jacob laughed, a sound of pure defiance. Let them question my citizenship. Let them dig through my family's history. They'll find nothing but hard-working people who've contributed to this community for generations. I'm not afraid of the truth. My scholarship was suspended based on lies, Maria said, her chin raised with stubborn pride. Maybe it's time I showed them what a real education looks like. You can't study justice in a classroom. You have to fight for it. Dimitri, who had been quietly working on his laptop throughout the conversation, looked up with the first genuine smile Amara had seen from him in days. While you were having your moment of inspiration, I've been reaching out to Heinrich Mueller and the other business owners who called the radio station. They want to meet. Tonight. They want to pool their resources, their evidence, their legal strategies. They want to coordinate a united response, he continued, instead of letting Khalil pick them off one by one like he's been doing. Amara felt tears pricking her eyes, but they weren't tears of defeat anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of recognition, of the overwhelming power that comes from realizing you're not alone in your fight. Her phone buzzed with another text from Khalil. Time is running out. Accept our offer now, or face the consequences alone. She showed the message to her team, and Klaus actually laughed out loud. Alone, he said. Does he have any idea what he's actually up against? Amara typed back, counteroffer. Apologize to every business owner you've harmed, compensate them fairly for their losses, and leave Munich. You have until tomorrow night. After that, you face all of us together. As she hit send, she felt her grandmother's presence as clearly as if Adora Okafor had been standing right beside her. Not in some mystical sense, but in the strength that flows from one generation to the next, in the understanding that some battles are worth fighting no matter the cost, and in the knowledge that the most powerful weapon against corruption is a community united in pursuit of justice. So, she said, looking around at the faces of the people who had chosen to stand with her, are we ready to finish what my grandmother started? The chorus of yes that answered her was strong enough to shake the chandelier. When facing overwhelming odds, what gives you the strength to keep fighting? Share your thoughts below about what community means to you. The meeting took place in the back room of Heinrich Mueller's former bakery, a space that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and yeast despite being empty for months. By 9 p.m., 14 former business owners had gathered around a collection of mismatched tables, their faces illuminated by the harsh light of fluorescent bulbs that Heinrich had convinced the new landlord to leave functioning for one more night. Amara looked around the room and saw a lifetime of dreams that had been systematically destroyed. Anna Schneider, elegant even in defeat, with her hotel management certificates framed and stacked in a corner. Roberto Sanchez, whose calloused hands still bore the scars from decades of kitchen work. Chen Wei, surrounded by ledgers that documented 30 years of import business success before it was all taken away. But there was something else in their faces now, something that hadn't been there when they were fighting alone. Purpose. Unity. The dangerous calm of people who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Show them what we found, Heinrich said to Dimitri, who had spent the last 2 hours coordinating with each of the former business owners to compile their evidence. Dimitri opened his laptop and projected the screen onto the bakery's whitewashed wall. What appeared was a web of connections so intricate and damning that it took Amara's breath away. Each of you thought you were facing isolated attacks, Dimitri began, his voice carrying the authority of someone presenting irrefutable evidence. But when we mapped out the timeline, the methods, and the financial trail, a clear pattern emerges. He clicked through a series of charts showing bank transfers, shell companies, and coordinated timing of anonymous complaints. Every business here was targeted using the same playbook. Same fabricated violations. Same anonymous tip-offs. Same shell companies making lowball offers. And all of it traces back to the same source. Mansouri Holdings, Roberto said grimly. More than that, Dimitri continued. We can prove coordination between Khalil's operation and specific officials in multiple city departments. The same inspector who found violations at your bakery, Heinrich, was the one who targeted Roberto's restaurant. The same fire safety official who shut down Anna's hotel was the one who threatened Chen's import warehouse. Anna Schneider leaned forward, her business acumen evident even in this makeshift war room. That's not coincidence. That's organized corruption. Exactly. And it gets better, Dimitri said, clicking to the next screen. Because Khalil made one crucial mistake. He got greedy. The new image showed financial records that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. While he was manufacturing crises for your businesses, he was also taking out massive insurance policies on the properties he planned to acquire. Fire insurance, vandalism insurance, business interruption insurance. All perfectly legal, but only if the businesses actually failed on their own. Amara felt her pulse quicken. But if he caused the failures, then it's insurance fraud on a massive scale. Werner Hoffman's voice came from the doorway. Amara's attorney stepped into the room, followed by Dr. Sarah Hassan from the Munich Business Ethics Council, who was smiling for the first time since Amara had met her. Dr. Hassan? Amara stood, confused. I thought you said your investigation was suspended. It was, Dr. Hassan replied, her eyes bright with satisfaction. My superiors thought it was too risky to pursue Khalil while he was mounting his attack against you. But they didn't say anything about investigating insurance fraud, especially when presented with evidence this comprehensive. She gestured to Dimitri's projection. What you've assembled here isn't just proof of harassment and intimidation. It's evidence of criminal conspiracy involving public officials, fraudulent insurance claims, and systematic racketeering. Heinrich Müller stood up, his elderly frame straight with determination. What do you need from us? I need all of you to be willing to file formal complaints and testify about what happened to your businesses, Dr. Hassan said. And I need one of you to be willing to go undercover to get Khalil to incriminate himself. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Going undercover meant facing Khalil directly, putting yourself at personal risk to gather evidence that could finally bring him down. I'll do it, Amara said without hesitation. No, Gretchen said immediately. You're already his primary target. It's too dangerous. She's right, Jacob added. He's focusing all his attention on destroying you. He'll be too suspicious. But I'm the one he's trying to buy out, Amara countered. I'm the one who can realistically approach him about accepting his offer. Actually, Dr. Hassan said thoughtfully, there might be a better way. What if multiple business owners approached him simultaneously? What if you made him believe that his pressure campaign worked so well that everyone is ready to surrender at once? The idea hung in the air for a moment before Chen Wei started laughing. A trap, he said with admiration. We make him think he's won, get him to boast about his methods, document everything. More than that, Anna added, her hotel management experience showing. We coordinate it so he has to handle multiple surrenders at the same time. He'll be rushed, overconfident, more likely to make mistakes. Roberto nodded enthusiastically. And we do it somewhere we control, somewhere every word will be recorded. Where? Amara asked. Dimitri smiled. and there was something predatory in his expression. Goldener Hirsch. Tomorrow night. We invite him to a surrender dinner, where multiple business owners will formally accept his buyout offers. He'll think it's his victory celebration. He'll never agree to that, Maria said. It's too obvious. He will if we make it seem like we're trying to salvage some dignity from our defeat, Heinrich said shrewdly. We tell him we want to handle the transfers privately, professionally, away from public scrutiny. Appeal to his ego, let him think we're acknowledging his superiority. Dr. Hassan was nodding as the plan came together. We can have recording equipment throughout the restaurant. If he boasts about his methods, if he admits to the corruption, if he threatens anyone, we'll have everything we need for criminal charges. What about the officials who've been helping him? Roberto asked. The inspectors, the bureaucrats who've been manufacturing these violations? Once we have Khalil on tape admitting to the conspiracy, they'll turn on each other trying to cut deals, Dr. Hassan replied. Corruption cases always work that way. The first one to cooperate gets the best treatment. Werner, who had been quietly reviewing legal documents throughout the discussion, looked up with satisfaction. I can have immunity agreements prepared for anyone willing to testify. And I can ensure that all of your businesses are protected from retaliation during the investigation. The energy in the room was electric now, the despair of earlier replaced by the focused intensity of people who finally saw a path to justice. There's one more thing, Amara said, an idea forming in her mind. Khalil's weakness is his ego. He needs to feel superior, needs to humiliate the people he defeats. What if we give him exactly what he wants? What do you mean? Gretchen asked. I mean we let him think he's not just buying our businesses, he's destroying our spirits. We act broken, defeated, grateful that he's willing to save us from complete ruin. We feed his need to gloat, to explain exactly how clever he's been. Heinrich's eyes lit up with understanding. We make him the hero of his own story. Let him tell us all about his brilliant strategy, how he manipulated the system, how he outmaneuvered us at every turn. Exactly. And while he's savoring his victory, we'll be recording every word, every admission, every detail of his criminal operation. As the group began working out the specifics of their plan, Amara felt her phone buzz with yet another text from Khalil. Last chance expires at midnight. After that, the gloves come off completely. She showed the message to the room, and the collective response was laughter, not bitter or defeated, but the confident laughter of people who knew they held the winning hand. Send him this, Anna suggested, and she dictated, we surrender. All of us. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., Goldener Hirsch. Come celebrate your victory properly. You've earned it. As Amara sent the message, she felt her grandmother's presence again, not as a memory this time, but as a living legacy. Every choice Adora Okafor had made, every battle she had fought, every alliance she had built, had led to this moment. Khalil Mansouri thought he was coming to a surrender ceremony. He had no idea he was walking into a reckoning 35 years in the making. The trap was set, the evidence was gathered, and the community he had tried to destroy was about to show him what happens when you underestimate the power of people fighting together for justice. Tomorrow night, the war would end. And this time, the good guys were going to win. The dining room of Goldener Hirsch had never looked more beautiful. Amara had spent the afternoon personally arranging every detail. Crystal glasses catching the warm light from the chandeliers, fresh flowers on each table, the finest wines from their cellar breathing in elegant decanters. To any observer, It would have appeared to be a celebration dinner for Munich's most successful businessmen. Which, in a way, it was. Khalil Mansouri arrived at exactly 8 p.m., dressed in a tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Tariq Qadri followed close behind, both men radiating the confident swagger of conquerors coming to claim their spoils. They paused in the doorway, surveying the scene with the satisfaction of predators who had finally cornered their prey. Around the restaurant's table sat the former business owners, Heinrich Müller, Anna Schneider, Roberto Sanchez, Chin Wei, and 10 others, each one playing their role to perfection. Their postures were defeated, their expressions resigned, their voices soft with the tone of people who had accepted inevitable surrender. "Gentlemen," Amara said, approaching them with a smile that held just the right amount of bitter acceptance. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit wherever you'd like. Tonight is your celebration." Khalil chose the center table, positioning himself where he could see everyone in the room while basking in their collective defeat. Hidden throughout the restaurant, Dimitri's recording equipment captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating moment. "I must say," Khalil began as Gretchen personally served him the finest champagne, "I'm impressed by how quickly you all came to your senses. I was prepared for this to drag on for months." "We're business people," Heinrich replied, his voice carefully modulated to sound broken but respectful. "When we realized the futility of fighting your superior resources, we knew it was time to cut our losses." "Superior resources," Khalil repeated with a laugh that made Amara's skin crawl. "Is that what you call it? I prefer to think of it as superior intelligence. You see, the mistake most people make is thinking that business is about products or services. It's not. Business is about power, the power to control markets, to influence officials, to make problems appear and disappear at will." Tariq raised his glass in a toast. "To power properly applied." As the glasses clinked, Dr. Hassan, monitoring the feeds from a van parked 3 blocks away, smiled with satisfaction. They already had admissions of corruption, but they needed more specific details to ensure criminal convictions. "I have to ask," Anna said, playing her part beautifully, "how did you coordinate everything so perfectly? The timing, the inspections, the financial pressure, it was like watching a masterclass in business warfare." Khalil preened under the flattery, exactly as they had predicted he would. "It's all about understanding systems and the people who run them. Take health inspectors, for example. They're overworked, underpaid civil servants who see thousands of restaurants every year. When someone with influence suggests they might want to pay special attention to certain establishments." He shrugged eloquently. "Well, they're very motivated to find whatever problems might exist." "And if problems don't exist?" Roberto asked, his voice filled with the awe of someone witnessing genius at work. "Then you create them," Khalil said matter-of-factly, cutting into his perfectly prepared beef tenderloin. "A few degrees adjustment on a thermostat here, some expired ingredients planted in a storage area there, a little creative photography of violations that can be fixed immediately after the inspection. It's remarkably simple when you have the right connections." Around the room, the former business owners exchanged glances that appeared to be defeat but were actually barely contained triumph. Every word Khalil spoke was being recorded in high definition, building an airtight case for criminal conspiracy, corruption, and fraud. "What about the financial pressure?" Chen asked. "Our suppliers suddenly having problems, insurance premiums skyrocketing, permit renewals being delayed, that couldn't have been coincidence." Tariq laughed, gesturing with his wine glass. Khalil has cultivated relationships throughout the city's bureaucracy for years. A word here, a favor there, sometimes a more direct form of encouragement. It's amazing how cooperative people become when their own interests are properly aligned. Direct encouragement? Amara asked, her voice carefully neutral. Nothing illegal, of course, Khalil said with a smile that suggested otherwise. But when a building inspector realizes that his daughter's university applications might be viewed more favorably if he shows proper attention to certain properties, well, that's just good citizenship. The admissions were flowing freely now, each one more damning than the last. Khalil and Tariq were so intoxicated by their own success, and by Gretchen's excellent wine selection, that they were detailing their entire operation with the pride of artists explaining their masterpieces. The beauty of the system, Khalil continued, warming to his subject, is that the victims always think they're facing isolated problems. They never realize they're just one piece of a larger strategy until it's far too late to coordinate any effective resistance. Like my grandmother tried to do 35 years ago? Amara asked quietly. The question cut through Khalil's self-congratulation like a blade through silk. His expression shifted from triumphant to wary in an instant. What did you say? My grandmother, Adora Okafor, the Nigerian diplomat who documented your father's corruption in the 1980s. The woman who built a network of businesses and community connections that you've spent 3 years trying to destroy. Amara's voice was steady, controlled, but filled with a power that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. Did you really think I didn't know why you targeted this neighborhood specifically? The color drained from Khalil's face as he realized the true nature of the trap he had walked into. Around the room, the former business owners were no longer slouching in defeat. They were sitting straight, watching him with the focused attention of hunters who had cornered dangerous prey. You recorded everything, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every word, Dmitri confirmed, emerging from his position near the bar with several other men who were clearly law enforcement officers. Every admission of corruption, every detail of your criminal conspiracy, every threat against these good people. Dr. Hassan entered through the kitchen doors, her official credentials prominently displayed. Khalil Mansouri, Tariq Qadri, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption of public officials, insurance fraud, extortion, and racketeering. As the officers moved to place handcuffs on both men, Khalil's composure finally cracked completely. This is impossible. I own half the officials in this city. You can't touch me. Actually, Dr. Hassan said with professional satisfaction, those officials started cooperating with our investigation about 6 hours ago. Amazing how quickly corrupt bureaucrats turn on each other when faced with criminal charges. The building inspector you mentioned? He's already provided detailed records of every bribe you paid him. The fire safety official? She documented every violation she fabricated on your orders. Your superior resources just became the evidence that will put you in prison. As Khalil and Tariq were led away in handcuffs, their threats and protests echoing through the restaurant, the former business owners sat in stunned silence for a moment before erupting into cheers and applause. Heinrich Müller raised his champagne glass, his elderly voice strong with emotion. To Adora Okafor, who started this fight, and to her granddaughter, who finished it. The toast was echoed around the room, but Amara found herself looking toward the kitchen, where her real family was gathered. Gretchen stood with tears of pride streaming down her face. Jacob was grinning so widely it looked like his face might split. Maria was already on her laptop, probably researching how to get her scholarship reinstated. Klaus stood steady and sober, his hands no longer shaking, his eyes clear with purpose. "What happens now?" Anna asked. Werner, who had been documenting everything for his own legal purposes, looked up from his notes with satisfaction. "Now we rebuild. All of your business licenses will be restored, all fabricated violations will be expunged from your records, and you'll all be eligible for compensation from the city for the damages you've suffered." "And our businesses?" Roberto asked. "The properties that were fraudulently acquired will be returned to their rightful owners," Dr. Hassan confirmed. "Khalil's assets are being frozen pending restitution proceedings. You'll all have the opportunity to reclaim what was stolen from you." As the formal celebration continued around her, Amara slipped away to the quiet office behind the kitchen. She needed a moment to process what had just happened, to understand that the nightmare was finally over. She found herself staring at her grandmother's photograph, the one that had watched over every victory and defeat of the past 3 years. "We did it, Grossmutter," she whispered. "Your network held. Your vision survived. Your fight is finally finished." A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Gretchen entered, followed by the rest of her staff, her family. "So," Gretchen said, settling into the chair across from Amara's desk, "what's next for us, Moschen?" Amara looked around at these people who had stood with her when standing seemed impossible, who had risked everything to fight for justice, who had become more than employees or friends. They had become the living embodiment of her grandmother's belief in the power of community. "Next," she said, feeling a smile spread across her face for the first time in days, "we reopen this restaurant. We hire back every person who lost their job because of Khalil's lies. We expand our cultural exchange programs. We help other immigrant business owners get established in Munich. And we make sure this never happens again," Jacob added firmly. "How do we do that?" Maria asked. Amara thought for a moment, then smiled with the same dangerous expression that had once warned Khalil he was underestimating her. "We build something bigger than just individual businesses. We create a formal network, immigrant business owners, cultural organizations, community leaders. We share resources, coordinate support, document everything, and make sure that anyone who tries to repeat Khalil's tactics faces a unified response from day one." "A business owners' alliance," Klaus said thoughtfully. "With legal support, financial resources, political connections." "Exactly. My grandmother fought alone for 35 years. We don't have to." Dmitri, who had been quietly monitoring the aftermath of the arrests, looked up from his phone with news that made everyone in the room smile. "The prosecutor just called. Khalil's trying to negotiate a plea deal, but they're not interested. With the evidence we provided, they're confident of convictions on all charges. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in prison." "And Tarek?" Gretchen asked. "Already confessing everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Apparently, loyalty isn't as strong as he thought when faced with serious jail time." As her staff or family began making plans for reopening the restaurant and building their new alliance, Amara felt the weight of the past week lifting from her shoulders. The fight was over, the victory was complete, and the future stretched ahead of them filled with possibilities her grandmother could never have imagined. 3 hours later, as the last of the former business owners headed home to plan their own restorations, Amara stood alone in the quiet restaurant. The tables were cleared, the glasses were washed, and the chandeliers cast their warm glow over a space that would tomorrow once again welcome guests with dignity, respect, and the understanding that everyone, regardless of their background or origin, deserved a place at the table. Her phone buzzed with a text message, but this time it wasn't a threat or an ultimatum. It was from Heinrich Müller. Thank you for giving us our voices back. Your grandmother would be proud. She typed back, she taught me that the most powerful weapon against injustice is a community united in pursuit of what's right. Tonight we proved she was correct. As she locked up the restaurant and walked through Munich's quiet streets toward home, Amara reflected on everything that had changed in the span of a single week. She had discovered that her grandmother's legacy was stronger than she had ever imagined, that her community was more powerful than any individual threat, and that standing up to bullies, no matter how wealthy or connected, was always worth the risk. But more than that, she had learned that true victory wasn't just about defeating your enemies. It was about building something better in their place, creating a world where the next person facing similar challenges wouldn't have to face them alone. The war was over. The rebuilding could begin. And for the first time since inheriting her grandmother's legacy, Amara felt truly worthy of carrying it forward into whatever challenges the future might bring. What do you think makes a community truly strong? How do ordinary people create extraordinary change when they work together? Share your thoughts about the power of unity in the face of injustice. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If this touched your heart, then you're going to love the next one. It's just as powerful, and even more intriguing than you can imagine. So don't stop here. Check out more videos on my channel and continue the journey. I'll be waiting for you on the other side of that story. See you there.